To discuss this, we're joined by Chairman, African Democratic Congress, Lagos State, George Ashiru. Thank you so much, Mr. Ashiru, for joining us on the news.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me this morning.
You're welcome. So what's your take on the allegation that USAID is being used to finance terrorism in Nigeria and, of course, the reaction of the Senate?
Well, to start with, some of these statements are political statements. So we have to be objective when we analyze them. The senator who made the allegation in the United States probably was raising the issue in order to support President Trump's desire to cut off aid to the USAID program. And so this is an allegation that would essentially discourage the American people from wanting to support all forms of terrorism, all forms of aid to other countries, in the expectation that that aid may end up in the wrong hands. That's on one matter. On the other matter, we have had in the past where, for example, the funds that have been given through NGOs, that some of those NGOs perhaps were not altruistic as expected, and there's not enough checks and balances to ensure that those people that are on the ground in some of these places, the fund that is, that they are receiving, they're actually not using them for the purpose of which they're using them. And then don't forget, even terrorist organizations, these are individuals that they can merge with the population. You can't even tell whether they are terrorists. They don't wear uniforms. And so they could be inadvertently receiving some of this donations, some of this aid, some of this food, some of these materials, and they're using it to, to take care of their operations. So really, truly, there's a possibility. But like I said, it is a balanced card that we have to ensure that we look at it with that kind of objective viewpoint.
So whether or not these allegations are either political or fact-based, what impact do you think it would have? I'm talking about the diplomatic relationship that Nigeria and U.S. has.
Well, USAID, it's just like when Babangida was a president of Nigeria, we had a technical aid corps. Basically, these are the ways in which they use diplomacy for soft power. So the government of the United States of America will always attempt to send money to other countries in order to get their diplomatic friendship or relationship and to have influence in those nations. So I suspect that what is happening right now is that the current administration wants to investigate how this money is allocated, where it's going, how much of it is going out, in hopes of savings. And then, of course, they might also decide that some of that is not even needed, whatsoever. So clearly, there's a possibility of that. When it comes to Nigeria, we have to look at where the money goes. What's the majority of the areas? Agriculture, displaced people, the health programs, particularly the health programs, for which the federal government of Nigeria has had to allocate $200 million of its own resources as a stopgap measure. At the end of the 90-day period in which this is being reviewed, some of which is going to be restored and some of it will probably be cut. But I think what we have to take into consideration is that the U.S. embassy in Nigeria, which is actually the one that supervises the funding, works through NGOs, works through non-state actors, and they are the ones who have to do the investigation to find out if the senator was correct in presuming that the funds that were released were actually released and used for the purpose and to the people for which they were to be used for.
Well, some people think that the summoning of the service chiefs is a charade. Is it possible that these service chiefs wouldn't have known or identified the sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria, owing to the fact that it has gone on for over a decade?
Well, in these days of cryptocurrencies and various means and of laundering money, it's not all of the funding available to a criminal organization that you can actually investigate. It is the intelligence agency's job to find a way to do that. But the Senate calling for the heads of the various security agencies is essentially to remind them that they have a job to do and that we do not need another government to be telling us what we ought to know and be telling them. And so if there's terrorism in your country and you're not able to investigate the source of the funding of that terrorism and cut it off, sanction the people behind it, take them to court where necessary, jail those who need to be jailed, then that means you're actually not doing enough work to stop the war. And I think this is an opportunity, it's a clarion call, it's an opportunity for us to look inwards and say, are we really doing the intelligence work required? Or are we simply buying more weapons and fighting them, whereas they're receiving funds to fight back at us? And we're not looking at the source of the funding. And in war, it's very strange. One of the ways in which you effectively win a war is through economic activity. So you have to find a way to prevent your adversary from having access to resources to wage war against you. So if we have been fighting for 20 years and various governments have tried and failed, it either means there are governments in the world that are funding these terrorist organizations operating in Nigeria, or there are people within Nigeria funding them in order to destabilize the political entity for the political gains. All of it still points to the fact that after 20 years, we need to have had some level of knowledge as to where this is and start to cut it off step by step. And I think what the Senate is doing is hoping that they will get some answers to that, which the rest of us Nigerians are waiting to hear what the outcome will be.
So it's quite interesting that before now we've had intelligence reports about a list of Boko Haram insurgency sponsors, a list a couple of years ago being presented to the Nigerian government. Nothing was done about it. If this investigation comes to a head and revelations spill out, what would you expect the Nigerian government this time to do?
Well, when it comes to criminal justice, evidence has to be hard and fact and available. So it's easy to arrest people on the presumption that they are involved in funding or supporting terrorism or any form of criminal activity. But the prosecutors really have to do a good job in investigating and bringing the facts to the ground, because that's what the justices of the various courts are interested in. They're not interested in allegations. They're interested in evidence. And when you do not have experienced investigators, or the various intelligence agencies do not provide the facts that support what they claim, what they allege, then these people are going to go free. And so that is another opportunity for us to also look at our entire criminal justice system. How is it that people who are arrested for kidnapping suddenly are walking the streets? People who are arrested even with arms for terrorism are released after a couple of months or after a couple of years, whatever the basic reasons are. It's an opportunity to overhaul our entire criminal justice system, I believe. And this is a clarion call for every tier of government to get involved.
All right. So what potential risk do you think such allegations pose to international aid operations in conflict-affected regions like Nigeria?
Well, you see, at the end of the day, we need to live in a country where we don't need foreign aid to be able to survive, to carry out activities, for the budget of Nigeria to be self-sustaining. I think it's a very, very dangerous thing for governments to rely on foreign intervention, either loans or grants or aid, to be able to carry out its own budgetary priorities. So over time, I believe that governments should look at the fact that all these other foreign governments that are supporting you, they have an interest in supporting you for whatever reasons, and you have to be able to be free to make your own internal policies without the influence of external factors. A lot of people are alluding to the fact that President Obama, for example, withheld some support and aid to the Nigerian government at that time, with the hope politically of removing that government in power. You don't want to be in that position if you're a sitting president or governor or local government chairman. You don't want to rely on a foreign state to support your local social welfare programs, not even basic infrastructure programs, social welfare programs, of which the people rely on. So that when it is cut off suddenly, then the people suddenly look at you and say, we can't eat, we can't drink, and then they hold you responsible, and then there's chaos in the land. So I think over time, while we are very thankful to receive this from foreign countries, this is these grants, these support programs, we have to be able to carry out 100% of our budget with our own revenues, so that whatever we get, just as supplementary support in order to grow our economy over time. That's what I believe. And I think over the next 2-3 years, any government who is listening, even as I speak, to start thinking, how do I replace $700 million, $800 million, $900 million, $1.2 billion worth of aid every year? How do I replace it with local revenues? And that should be the target. Difficult as it may be, that's a reality. We can see what's happening right now to Ukraine. They were receiving aid, all of a sudden it's shut down. And now the country is at the mercy of foreign powers. We never want that to happen to our country, Nigeria.
Thank you so much, George Ashiru, Chairman, African Democratic Congress in Lagos State, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.